Set of slides here, Mark.
Well, good afternoon, investors, and welcome to our mid-December bull sessions. My name is Mark Robertson. I am founder and managing partner of Manifest Investing, and we've been doing this now for the better part of 4 years. More on that later, probably. But I'm joined here by my dear colleague and longtime investor and educator who loves to share so that people can also experience this event, this entire experience. Ken Cavola, good afternoon, sir.
Well, good afternoon to you. That's a really old picture.
It is. It's from Chicago a few
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah, really old picture. Yeah.
Well, you know why I like it, right? That was my
Well,
favorite laptop.
oh, your red laptop. Okay.
Yeah, I had that laptop for years, and that was the best machine I think I've ever had. So
Ah,
good stuff. Yeah, that's a Chicago convention where we're probably talking about Aflac and the triple play screening stuff that we were talking about at the time. That's probably 10 years ago,
at
I'm guessing.
least, because I don't even
At
own
least.
that jacket anymore. So,
Good stuff. We're also joined here, speaking of national conventions, by our dear friend and guest damsel, Kim Butcher. Good afternoon, Kim.
Good afternoon. I've been in the kitchen being busy. I
Are you
made
making
jam.
cookies? Christmas
No,
cookies?
apricot jam. Homemade
Ah,
apricot jam.
nice. And then from Houston, are you making any type of jam or cookies, Matt? Matt Spielman.
No, I'm in between there. The Comus pear crop is finally good enough for the first time in 3 years to maybe get some in, but we will hand out to the neighbors some of my oatmeal scotchies.
Very nice. We'll be down to pick some up.
It's chilly enough. We actually might get into the 30s for 2 days before we're back to regular programming. So they'll be in a Christmas mood.
So when it's 30 degrees in Houston, does everybody like not go outside?
No, if they have half an inch of snow, they won't.
when it's 60 degrees,
The cold is
when
just
it's
cold.
60 degrees in Houston, they don't go outside.
Yeah. The problem is you have to bring all your plants in. You have to bring your plants in,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and all the news talks about winterizing your sprinklers because you don't do that otherwise. All those things, solved problem. There are many solved problems I remember from my time in Michigan that are major revelations. But every place has something like that.
You didn't ask me what Natalie and I are baking to give away to the neighbors, Mark.
Well, I thought we might run up there and steal some of it. What are you
We're
working on?
we're baking stolons, and we're going to
Ooh.
be giving stolons away to everybody, but they go really fast, so you better get on your rocket sled. Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
I gotta ask, what are stolons?
It's a German sweet fruit bread. It's kind of football shaped, and it has a long shelf life, and it's covered in powdered sugar, and the inside is, well, you can make it with like apricots and uh, cherries and things like that, or you can put almost any kind of fruit inside of it that you want. But it's very traditional German Christmas bread, very traditional. My mother made it for years and years and years, and we've been making it for probably, oh, we've been married for 54 years, so but we've probably been making it for 56 or 58 years. So,
Well, Wendy might be in the mood. She just had hopefully her last round of surgery to restore her leg, and it was very successful. So maybe it's
well,
time to celebrate a little bit.
I don't endorse grocery store products very much, like we endorse hot dogs. But I will tell you that if you have an Aldi's nearby, Aldi has a really pretty decent Stollen that they sell for a very reasonable price. They have 3 different flavors. So if you have an Aldi's nearby, go into Aldi's and look in their
Yeah,
specialty
you got some
aisle,
good ones.
and you'll see what a Stollen looks like. Yep.
Got to support them. All right, we are going to talk a little bit about the Buttonwood portfolio today, and just recognize that Tin Cup, which is approaching its 30th birthday. It's a model portfolio which was started back in the mid 1990s. So it's coming up on 30 years, and the balance is very delicately approaching 5 million. So we'll spend some time talking about that. Pressing on, this is our weekly reminder that Portillo's is not a sponsor of the session, but they should be. And the forum at Manifest was just full of videos and descriptions of this is a comedy act by a guy talking about friends in Chicago who took him to Portillo's, and he encountered the famous chocolate cake shake, which I have not done. Kim, have you indulged in one of their cake shakes?
I have not. And after watching the video of how it was made,
You mean the
I don't know if I would, because it might only have 150 grams of sugar in that shake.
Well, they measured the frosting by the pound.
That's what I mean. It has 2 pounds of frosting on it. And that's for the whole cake. But I was like, oh, and it's not talking about how much icing is in the cake, then how much sugar is in the vanilla ice cream.
That too, yeah. It's probably
It's probably delicious, but not good for you.
a huge source of energy.
Can somebody in our audience name the comedian? Because I've watched some of his programs on Netflix, and he is really funny.
Yeah, he was good when he was talking about Portillo's, that's for sure.
He's not fat, he's fluffy.
They call him Fluffy something.
Yeah. So if somebody in our audience can name him, we'll give you a gold star. All right.
Fluffy or Puffy?
No, Fluffy.
Fluffy. Okay. All right. Moving on while somebody works on that. Here is our standard boilerplate disclaimer. No investment recommendation is intended. Everything that we do here is about education. And as I was saying a few minutes ago about Ken, and it actually covers all of us, we are here to share. We're here to share observations about things we have observed, things called philosophies, methods, techniques, and the analysis and discovery of investing opportunities and how to take care of a personal or a club portfolio. And the modern investment club movement is now approaching 8 decades old. And a lot of us have experienced some pretty wonderful things. But please do your own homework before making any investment decision. If we talk about a stock that we own, by the way, I own a few shares of Portillo's, that hot dog restaurant enterprise out of Chicago. And we'll try to remember to let you know if we own anything else. Please form your own opinions, make your own decisions about anything we talk about here. Our 2 email addresses are down there at the bottom. If you have follow-up questions, want copies of the slides, or if you have suggestions for future things you'd like to kick around, we get some really cool nudges. And I don't know about you, Ken, but I didn't know quite where we would go with this about 4 years ago. And we have actually visited some absolutely fascinating and educating realms that we probably would not have gone without the audience pushing, and as we just continue to search and discover. I hope you feel the same.
I absolutely do. I was afraid this would devolve into something very rote, and it hasn't. It stays fresh, and we go in lots of different directions, do lots of different things. So I'm very happy. Our audience comes through. Mark, I got all kinds of answers, and they all agree except for one. Everybody agrees that it's Gabriel Iglesias, and I agree with that name as well. Gabriel Iglesias.
Well, that sounds right.
But he calls himself Fluffy. He does not call himself Jelly Roll. Somebody told me it was Jelly Roll. He does not call himself Jelly Roll. Okay.
Hey, I have been newly introduced to Jelly Roll and a couple other performers that are very popular with 8 and 10-year-olds that I had no idea about. So I'm learning. My horizons continue to expand. All right, here's our look at the stock market. A quick look at the stock market as depicted or represented by the value line arithmetic average. That's simply taking the prices of the 1,700 companies in the standard edition, forming an index with those prices, and keeping track of it with those green bars. The green bar on the farthest right is the current quarter. Those are quarterly bars. You can see that they zig and they zag. The blue line through them is simply a mathematical computerized regression at about an 11% slope up through there. You can see that there are periods when it dives below the line and when it goes above the line, like it did in the COVID and post-COVID recovery, followed by a pretty nasty period shortly after that, after we were overstimulated. And then we're actually back to the point where that bright green bar is peeking its head above the line, suggesting maybe a little bit of frothiness to the current market.
Yeah, whenever your club gets confused about these numbers on value line, point them to the same square that you just put onto the slide, folks. The square is on the front of every single quarter or weekly report. It gives the median estimates for a lot of things, but it also tells you when the market low was and when the market high was. And everybody can remember those market lows back in 20, and everybody can remember the market highs that are happening right now. And look at the difference in the forward-looking numbers as you compare low to high.
Yeah, so we're down pretty close to that one.
Yep.
And that represents about an 8% return, and our forecasts basically agree with that also.
Yeah.
And then I just love what Morgan does to a Wall Street Journal headline at the bottom of the page there, because that is so true.
Well, the point is that you could say that any market is doomed. Any market's going to eventually move down. I don't care where you're at. So unless you're talking if you can hit that trough, and we haven't been very successful at hitting the trough exactly ever. So.
Yeah, and it came up quite a bit here in the last week. Nick DiVirgilio actually posted some stuff on Art Cashin, who passed away, and he was infamous for saying, well, if you hear they're thinking about launching the missiles, buy as much as you possibly can, because you're probably going to profit from the dip in price. And if they do launch the missiles, it won't matter anyhow. So, yeah, those type of headlines are probably not all that valuable. All right, checking in on our groundhogs. Here is the top 40.
We aren't sending the kids out in the hall yet to duck and cover, Mark. So that's a good thing. Okay. That's a really old reference for those of you that are as old as I am, running out into the hallway and sitting there and covering your head and thinking that was going to protect you.
I can remember at the parochial school where they'd have us get under the desks. Now, what in the world did they think the desks were going to prevent? In the worst situation. Well, the only time you want to do that around here is when Jim Gallagher's picking stocks, because if you're a groundhog participant and Jim's in the contest, you probably need to hide under a desk. He's the one up at the top there, close to 3 million. And
Jim has widened his lead again. He's widened his lead by about 100,000 or more since last week. So those are really chugging along. I really like it that we have a club up there in the top 5 now, though, too. Cowtown has moved into the number 5 spot, and that's great. And we have a Michigan club in the top 10, so that's great as well.
Yeah, a lot of community favorites and people that have been around. B.I. Baker's been around. Mutual Club of Cheney's been in the contest for like 15 years. Power City Ladies, of course, 3-time champions, have been in it well over a dozen times, so it's good to see that happening. And Tom Gardner, for the first time in memory, is threatening to take the celebrity title. And we just wanted to point out that for the first time in a very long time, Kathy Wood is almost in the top 40. And as I shared with Ken before we got underway here, I can take personal credit for that, because I was moving some money around a few months ago, and I did sell my position in ARKK, and it subsequently ignited like somebody hitting a pile of leaves with a flamethrower.
Well, Mark, I might be 68th, but I belong to clubs that are 40th, 37th, and 31st. So I'll take that as a win for the moment. Okay.
There is power in numbers and investing with your friends. Imagine that. All right. A quick look at the perspectives. Again, this is our weekly slide, which we just basically check in for long-term context. It's a 10-year trailing look in most cases. The 10 companies that you see here are the 10 most widely followed companies by our subscribers, and you'll find them near the top of the Better Investing Top 100. You will find them in a number of our portfolios. I will attest that I personally own Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Stryker since the 1990s.
I'm
And
laughing here, Mart, because I'm reading Dwight Kunkel's quoting of Jimmy Buffett in a song about the next explosion. Okay, so I don't have time to read the whole thing, but it's humorous. So Dwight has done a really nice job of either pulling those lyrics from memory or doing a quick copy paste from the internet. I'm not quite sure which.
I'll have to pull that down and maybe include it in next week's session because we'll be in a celebration mood. Good stuff. Anyhow, the point of the slide is you can access companies like this. You can discover them investing with your friends, and you can experience those type of numbers. Those numbers, Microsoft is our largest family holding. Do actually own a few shares of CVS Health, although that did come to an end last month. Yeah, good fun. And then, of course, the Tin Cup demonstration portfolio we're going to talk about, and the investing roundtable is our 14-year demonstration of how friends can come together and very independently think their way through opportunities. And it's not choreographed, folks. We bring the ideas, we show the analysis, and these are the results. 17% over 14 years is frankly a whole lot of fun.
I think it's interesting, Mark, that one of these top 10 stocks has moved as much as it has. When we started putting this particular slide up, Cognizant was in double digits negative. It was down around negative 12 point something or other, and it's moved up now to negative 7.7 something or other as far as relative returns concerned. And the annualized total return for Cognizant has moved from around 0 to 5.5 now. Still not a stellar mover, but that's quite a big move for, I would imagine, in the last 8 or 10 months, you know?
Yeah, a lot of the companies, we did an entire session, talk about sessions that we've done at Bull Sessions. We did a session on the Accenture's, Cognizants, and EPAM systems of the world. And Cognizant has begun to recover. You know, you're basically looking at the global recession and recession fears impacting those type of companies. And there is a recovery in progress there. It probably speaks well for the globe. Anything else here, sir?
No, let's keep on a moving.
All right, I found this one interesting. This is still one of our favorite sources of ideas for small companies. It's Brown Capital Small Company investors, and it's been a great fund over the years. You can see that by that blue line that it's actually had a pretty good run over a number of years until the last couple of years. Like many of the small company funds that are out there, they have suffered greatly. They've actually fallen behind the S&P 500 and the Magnificent Seven, or whatever they're calling it these days, but it is lagging. And as a result of that, the paragraph on the right, I'll leave it to you to read it, but the nutshell version is they had a couple very large shareholders, institutional accounts, that took their money and ran. The result of that is a living example of the January effect. Here in the fourth quarter of this year, these guys have had to basically sell off a bunch of holdings, and they would literally probably be large enough to impact many of those companies when it comes to the stock price. So you're seeing the January effect played out, and this particular fund had a number of redemptions, and the most recent redemption is quite sizable. So if you bought this company last year in a cash account, a regular traditional brokerage account, you could be looking at a tax bill impact, which can be quite uncomfortable, if not painful. And we'll say it again. I think I can get away with saying this. I don't understand why you would keep a traditional mutual fund in anything other than a retirement account anymore. And I've actually met with people and helped them understand this situation, and basically they stay away from. There are some really solid, good traditional mutual funds out there, but you probably don't want to hold them in a cash account. And just food for thought. But this is a living example, a microcosm of what can happen with something like this. Any thoughts on this, Ken?
Well, I think that holding these kind of things was very enticing to younger investors back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s even. But there have been things that have taken over and act as much better conduits for your investment. One of them is the creation of these 401ks and the ability to self-direct 403bs and things like that that really weren't in existence back 35, 40 years ago. If you're holding mutual funds that you've held for a long, long time, you're still paying capital gains every single year. And sometimes, as in this example, really big ones, it really causes issues. And your overall return for these stocks that are paying out people as they withdraw their funds many times match what's happening in Brown Small Company right now. That's a negative 8% relative return, more than 8% negative, and that's a pretty big black eye for any kind of a mutual fund that you might want to hold for a long-term holding. If you want these kind of funds, maybe you should be looking at ETFs, which give you a little bit more, give you a lot more control over capital gains than the traditional mutual fund does. Or maybe you need to make double sure that they're standing behind the tax curtain if you're going to put them into a portfolio that you're trying to manage.
Absolutely. And like I said a few minutes ago, Keith Lee really does know what he's doing. He thinks like we do. So this will remain a source of ideas, but I'd be a little bit uncomfortable with it in a traditional cash account.
The big idea, Mark, is that these capital gains were not caused by this manager just willy-nilly going out and moving things around and having a huge turnover rate.
No.
He was forced to do this by people pulling actual money out of the account. Think of it as a huge club with a member that owns 30 or 40% of the club suddenly saying, I'm leaving tomorrow, and you don't have the ability to transfer shares. You just have to sell shares and give them cash.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to think of it. Go ahead.
People often talk, particularly when they're declining to manage their own portfolios, they talk about the advantages that institutional investors have. This is clearly a disadvantage. I'm sure he did not want to redeem those shares either, but he had to.
Exactly. Yeah, this particular fund has investments, holdings in their active portfolio that go back to the 1990s, just to show you how much conviction they have when they find a company that they believe is great for the long term. And some of those probably ended up on the chopping block. And it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll come back and take a look at, well, what did they decide to sell, and what did they decide to keep as a potential lesson also? Did they improve
Mark,
their portfolio or not?
I think people are having a hard time in our audience figuring out red, blue, yellow on the graph there. There is a legend over on the left-hand side there. It's not really big, but the red is the blue is the investment itself. That's Brown Capital Management, and the red line is an index that you could compare to Brown Capital, probably something similar to the Russell 2000 or similar to a small company index. And then there's a category line too. I'm not quite sure the difference between index and category. Can you tell me that, Mark?
Yeah, the index is probably like the S&P small cap fund, and the category is all small company, small cap investing.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be a tiny bit confusing, but okay. Interesting moment. Speaking of moments, we are looking at we've been honored to celebrate $1, $2, $3, and $4 million milestones and we are within breathing room, striking distance of 5 million on this demonstration. And again, this is a demonstration we started back in the mid 1990s. It spans almost my entire experience with investment clubs and in this community. And it literally is taking the maximum amount you could invest in a 401k, and then for much of that time frame, pretending you could invest in common stocks. That became much more easy to do, although companies still don't talk about it much when you get involved in their 401ks and qualified plans. But literally following the technique, almost robotic, of turning the page, licking your finger, turning the page, looking for the best company when it comes to their return forecast and their financial strength and quality on a monthly basis. The chart that you see here is since the beginning of Manifest Investing. So you can literally look back at every month, every monthly decision, and see how that portfolio is done over time. And again, it's floating around within striking distance of 5 million as we come up on December 31st will actually be 30 years. I think it was Dan Hess out of North Carolina that originally suggested doing the demonstration. So I'm tipping my hat in the direction of North Carolina and saying thank you.
Mark, we have an interesting comment from Bakul out in the audience. Bakul Lala, he's out in California, and he's giving us an example of some small cap or small company ETFs that you might want to compare to the Brown Capital, to BCSIX. He's suggesting you might want to look at SCHA, and I think I'm reading this correctly from his post, IJR. And Bakul, if I got those tickers wrong, could you correct me as quickly as possible? But folks, you might look at SCHA and IJR, and he says they're small company ETFs, which you can use big charts or stock charts or any of those types of programs to compare performance over the last few years.
Yeah, the first one is a Schwab. I'm not sure the exact fund it is. The second one is pretty sure it's a Russell 2000 small company growth ETF. Pretty sure about that, IJR. But take a look at them, and then nice suggestion. Thanks, Bakul. All right, Ken, are you ready to Buttonwood for a minute or two?
Absolutely, Mark. We're putting $100 in a month. That's a invest regularly concept that we agreed we were going to follow when we created this portfolio, and it's gone pretty quickly, hasn't it, this full year? Because we're actually going to have a year plus in another couple of weeks, and we'll have an annualized return rather than a total return pretty quickly.
Well, I'll tell you, it's an amazing reminder of the power of discipline with an investment club and putting your money into a club every month. In our investment club in Chicago, some of the members after a few years were just amazed at the number which ultimately was generated. And it's like scraping, my father-in-law said, it's like scraping the money off the refrigerator that you keep around for tolls, and then suddenly, investing it like this, and then suddenly it's these type of numbers. It's just, again, that monthly discipline. I know how easy it is to get sidetracked without this type of discipline. So a lot of good, clean fun, and we are off to a fairly decent start. This will be converting to a rate of return here pretty soon, but call it about a 10% one for now.
Well, and one of our genius moves, we always make boneheaded moves, but one of our genius moves might be the purchase of Lulu in the last 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, that one's been kind of fun. I have to admit, anytime dealing with a retail, apparel retail stock can give one the heebie-jeebies, and I get that, but it's been a pretty good run. This is the portfolio from largest holding to smallest holding, and again, our objective here is to have a portfolio which outperforms the market, and we believe that this sales growth number is key. Want to keep that not at 11 or 12 like we've talked over the years, but more in keeping with the best funds out there that are closer to the 14, 15, perhaps even stretching as high as 16 on the
And,
overall growth.
and Matt, cover your ears for a second, okay? But as Luminar continues to move towards zero, that 89.6 is distorting our average less and less. So
There you go.
it was a pretty big distorter of our average, but we're much closer to 14 actual, even with or without Luminar right now at only 1.5% of the portfolio. So
Well, and I will take credit for the price going. I had what, a 900 bagger in one night a couple
well,
weeks ago.
you need to learn how to be a day trader, Mark. Okay.
Mr. Collins.
I woke up and the
Right.
price had gone from 1 to like 15, while I slept.
Oh, well, okay.
That's the best way for money to go up in value. You're sleeping. You're not worried about it.
There you go.
Yeah, but they also did some bookkeeping shenanigans to make
Well,
that happen, Kim. So
yeah, well, our 100 shares mysteriously dropped to 6.7, so that kind of wrecked the math a little bit. So yeah, that was a reverse split that we continue to
Mark,
hold out.
mathematically, does the cash figure into the growth number at all?
No, well, no,
It doesn't go in as a zero, though.
it
Then
doesn't
it goes.
not into that growth number, but it is a part
Okay,
of the yield and the
it's a part of
projected
the
return.
value, I know,
Yeah,
and part of
yeah,
the par. But the growth number is just the stocks in the portfolio, correct?
yes.
So you
So
can distort the number down by holding a large amount of cash then.
the par number for sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, you could distort the growth number. You, well, okay, I'll stop. I won't dig that hole for myself. Keep going. All right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're holding cash, keep in mind that a year ago, well, 2 years ago now, that cash return on cash was closer to zero. So if
Yeah.
you had a bunch of cash, then that would drag your overall return forecast down. So again, we're aiming for high quality companies. We think we've achieved that with the likes of, Visa, Alphabet, Google, Novo, Schlumberger, and believe it or not, Lulu. And this return at 11, again, we just saw that the average return right now is about 8%. So checking at about 11 or 12 is actually fairly healthy. So these are from largest to smallest. Here's a look at the worksheet, which you can tab into. This is a decision resource tool manifest where you can actually go in and play what if games with the portfolio. You go in and you're creating whatever they call it, a clone, so that you can do what if without affecting the actual original portfolio or dashboard. And in this case, what I have done is sort them from highest return forecast to lowest. So in a personal portfolio or a club portfolio, what you're typically going to be thinking is these are candidates for buying or adding, and these down here are potentially on the hot seat as you think about the portfolio itself. The other category, which places companies on the hot seat, again, we mentioned that we want to keep this number at 14, 15, or 16. So any company which is relatively low, single digit growth, Diageo comes to mind here at 6%. We want to be careful and we'd be quicker to divest Diageo than other companies with higher growth rates.
Well, and we're especially aware of the advice that has been given to us in a number of different sources, but most directly by Nicholson when he put together some of these investing handbooks. And the advice was be very careful to sell a company that's growing in double digits. Be very careful to sell it. So that whole list on the bottom there that Mark bracketed, if you look at their sales growth numbers, they're extraordinary. They're either fairly valued or a little bit overvalued at the moment. But the advice that we're trying to keep in mind is don't be real quick to pull the trigger on these double-digit growers. They can surprise you to the upside in ways that are very, very desirable for the portfolio. I agree, Mark, that there's a target on Diageo's back right now, and I'm not particularly fond of the 7.2 number attached to Excellus either. We've had back and forths about ACLS right from when we started this list, when we started our small company list, and ACLS is on our small company list, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Yeah.
So
So
literally,
yeah.
what Ken and I would be hoping for would be a price spike to the upside in either one of those. We've had just the opposite with ACLS. ACMR has also come down a bit from where we originally bought it. And Luminor, of course, gets the exemption as a speculation, fairly powerful speculation. And I do need to point out to Kevin Gologly, behave yourself there, that I do still own my shares of Western Alliance in my personal portfolio.
If I will say, Mark, that if you belong to a club and you've never used a worksheet at a club meeting to play games with your portfolio, then you've missed a fantastic learning opportunity. And the people that seem to get the most out of playing with a worksheet are some of the beginners that seem to get an idea about how little or how much you can change a portfolio by focusing on certain types of stocks to either remove or to increase. And you can do it without changing any of the underlying portfolio, because this is like Mark said earlier, a clone. So you're playing with a clone. You haven't touched the original. And any time that the clone gets too messed up, you just hit that reset button up there and you start all over with a fresh worksheet. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And we've worked with clubs that actually use it as a proposal technique. Here's the before condition of the portfolio. Here's the after if we take these decisions to sell and these decisions to buy. So a lot of
I'll
good,
tell you,
clean fun.
in one of my clubs, Mark, we have a constant debate going on with, do you buy a little bit for the next 5 or 6 meetings, or do you put in a fairly good sized chunk? The portfolio is almost $2 million. And the argument on the good sized chunk phase is that a little bit might be as much as 50 or 60 or 70,000. That might be a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and the little bit folks want to start with 5,000 or 10,000. And it never gets violent, it never gets nasty, but it certainly gets pointed at various times. And the worksheet can really help a lot in showing how little or how much you can change your basic underlying numbers in the portfolio by using different amounts of money in different places, especially if you have it to spend.
Yeah, without getting too deep into the laundry here, I mean, I experienced this firsthand in that Mutual Club of Detroit, where we had between 8 and 12 million in the portfolio, and if you were sitting there debating for over a half hour on a $20,000 position, I would attempt to tactfully and diplomatically persuade them that maybe we were not investing the right amount to have that amount of time committed to it. So yeah, it is helpful to do that. I mean, if we were going to add, Ken, I wouldn't mind seeing a tiny bit more technology. We rarely make decisions based on sector, but there's plenty of discretionary, plenty of healthcare, and I don't know, if I were throwing money at this portfolio myself, I would probably run ACMR over the coals. And Gentex is attractive, but it's a 7% position, so it's fairly full position. So maybe the $100 gets unspent at this point. Here's another look at the portfolio from just look at the actual positions.
I'm not particularly eager. That $100 represents about 3% of the portfolio right now, and I don't think that's too much to sit on. And so why don't we kind of sit on it? Are we going to have another infusion on January 1st?
Yes. So
So maybe we come back the first Tuesday in January and play with this when we have 200 plus whatever dividends might come in. So,
yeah, huge dividend coming in from Schlumberger. It's almost $2.
oh, right, there we go. So, and we can do some real thinking then too. And if we choose to sell, that thinking really helps a lot. I think a lot of clubs make a mistake. They focus sometimes on what they're going to sell, and they don't ask themselves, well, now what am I going to do with the money that's generated?
Hmm.
You don't want to necessarily just leave it all sitting there for another meeting or two. You want to sometimes reinvest it in either something you own or something that you've been watching.
Here's a look at the actual purchase transactions in the active portfolio. You can see there's some repeats here. There's a couple Lulus and a couple Schlumbergers, a couple Gentexes. But the thing I wanted to draw the audience's attention to, because Ken and I have spent some time on this over the last couple of years, when you look at, what type of headwinds are we facing here with these companies? And in the case of Excelis and Diageo, the sales, the revenues for 2025 are still predicted to be lower than 2024. So you are kind of running directly into a fairly strong headwind there. And if you look at some of the lower numbers on this page and you go back here, they're the ones that are showing up, giving us a little more heartburn than the others. So again, keep the trajectory and the trend on your visual analysis in mind. But when you see that type of a thing, then this is no shock to anybody that follows semiconductor companies. Um, these periods are going to happen for companies like Excelis. It's a good company. It's the
I've had people ask me to explain the arithmetic, and folks, the arithmetic is about as simple as you can make it. If it's black, then the sales are expected to be that percentage more in 2025, and if it's red, then the sales are expected to be that percentage less in 2025. That's all this is in this column. It's a simple, how much will the 2025 sales increase or decrease? That's all the arithmetic is. And Steve is asking what will happen to that worksheet as time goes by if you come back to it a different day. And Steve, I don't think the worksheet is meant to be a document that survives over history. I think you work with a fresh worksheet based on as current a set of data as you can possibly get in. So you want to freshen that thing up based on whatever's happened in the last week or 2 weeks since you last looked at it. That's the only way it's going to be beneficial to you, I think.
Yeah, Steve, keep in mind it's kind of like the movie The Matrix, where the guys are all splitting off and there's duplicates of all the agents. They're only good for the fight that they're in, and you got to start over with the new scene. That probably didn't make any sense at all, so I'll just keep moving on. All right. I thought this was kind of cool because I made it an investment club visit back in August where they were not happy with Lulu. And they were stunned when we did some screening results, and Lulu ended up near the top of the potential purchase or buy list back in August. And I defended it and basically said, look at the stock selection guide and the analysis of the company, and they were thinking about selling it, and the price was misbehaving, and many clubs have that person. I know nobody here would be that person, but when the ink is red, when your purchase price is higher than your price that's on the portfolio sheet, that makes everybody skittish. And I just basically tried to persuade them. Now I'm not doing an I told you so here, but again, the probability is stacked in your favor when you do an analysis like that. And this thing has basically doubled since that meeting in August. And you can see that it is now to the point where it might be a little bit overheated, a little bit overbought up here by this relative strength index. But then what I also want you to keep in mind as a long-term investor is the following page. This is the same company over a much longer time frame, giving you a much deeper perspective. Those are monthly price. These are daily price bars here. These are monthlies. going back all the way to 2015, and we used the money flow index, which is basically the RSI, only it's corrected for the amount of volume also. So it's volume adjusted. And so you've got back here way, way overbought. And here it's basically saying from a long-term perspective, it's actually still oversold. And you can see that here. I mean, it's basically not even back to the price levels achieved here. So again, the longer term perspective is pretty powerful. And this is a massive gain up to this 404 down from the low 200s just a few months ago. So I think these two side by side show you can have two different perspectives depending on whether you're a short term. To a trader, it's a screaming sell. To one of us, still looks pretty good. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I thought it was a screaming buy. My wife and I opened a position in Lululemon for the first time back in. We didn't go back one chart, Mark, if you would. We didn't pick the bottom like would have been really smart to do, but we're not worried about picking the bottom. But we did open a position in the first week in October, and then we added to that position 2 more times between October and the middle of November to end up with a full position. And we're pretty happy with Lululemon at this point as an investment. My sister, who we went to Florida with, is jumping around and telling everybody about how much money she made in it. So she only mimics whatever Natalie and I do in our portfolios. So it's been a really good investment. And most importantly, we used all the tools at our disposal, and we did our homework before we finally decided we were going to take a chance on this company. And then we watched it very, very closely, and it turned out to have a really happy ending when it was all said and done.
Yeah, and Chico's comes to mind. These things can have an end game, an end frame, and Chico's did that 2 or 3 times when its founders left. So you gotta be watching for that sort of thing, but good fun. Here's a reminder that we do archive all of the roundtables and bull sessions on the Manifest Investing page at YouTube. You can go there, you can subscribe, and we'll let you know anytime new content is added. There's that 10-year-old Chicago picture again, Ken, from a little while ago. And there's some good stuff here. You can see that the best small companies, which we put out every year at Halloween, was actually pretty well received. That's got a high number of views. All of the bull sessions leading up to that are basically scouring the woods for opportunity. So the best small companies that we put out around Halloween, and I'm going to sneak in one quick update. Ken, do you want to leave the room, or are you okay?
Go on. I'm going to just remind you about it if this thing tanks somewhere, okay.
Yeah, if we jinx it, that's one thing. Cleaned up the rabbit. He actually took a shower and he's back to being a white rabbit. Very festive up there. Here is since Halloween how the companies have done in the portfolio, and I think we're off to a pretty decent start. And same old rule of 5 situation, a couple disappointments at the bottom and a couple that have greatly exceeded expectations at the top. Like I was saying here just a few minutes ago, we did avoid anything here that looked nasty over the next year, attempting to have a bit of a premium or a buffer, if you want to think of it that way, for the companies that we did select. And some of these are just going through natural gyrations. ACMR, still like the company, pretty solid numbers across there, but they have cranked, but 11% since Halloween is pretty good versus a market at about 7%. So you can see that relative return is about 4% so far. So without further ado, I don't want to jinx this, but just thought we'd let everybody know. Credo had a really nice day. What's going on?
I will say that
Credo?
I don't think
Credo?
you or I would have ever picked Credo as the best performing stock in this list of 20. I think we had other favorites on the list that are not performing nearly as well. So you're always surprised when you look at who's at the top. Not always, but almost always surprised. And I'm very glad to see one of the worst performers from last year up near the top of the list this year, and that's Yeti. It was a terrible performer last year, and it's really recovered and seems to be doing quite well. And then our number 2 company last year is doing number 4 this year. When a company can do that year over year, I think you're looking at Technoglass and you're saying to yourself, we've found a really good, rock solid company that knows how to turn top line into bottom line profit. So there's a lot of good things to look at on this particular list of companies. And it's early in the game yet, too. This one goes all the way until October 31st. So it's early in the game, and there's even room for that ARDX to move upward into the green area there. So.
Hey, big day coming. Congress shuts down on 9 days from now. So maybe they're going to pass that legislation. And interestingly enough, for those of you that aren't familiar with the company, they make innovative therapy for kidney dialysis patients. And it's been going pretty well. The patients and doctors, practitioners are responding well to it. I did spend the weekend with a couple of registered nurses that I happen to be family with. Both of them are my sisters. And they explained something to me that Kim Butcher has often pointed out. When something really works when it comes to healthcare, and this seems to be a superior solution for people that are in the kidney dialysis mode, the nurses and doctors and patients, they find a way, no matter what the insurance companies and whatever do, and they simply do find a way. And that anecdotally is happening, so we're watching it. I find it interesting to watch this company it's maturing. It's becoming a real company with real earnings now, Ken. They have real earnings now, Ken. So
Imagine that.
there's great hope. But Ardelyx, interesting study. You can read about it extensively in the Manifest Forum.
And since we're talking about all these A stocks, I know that there's a lot of stocks that have their first letter A, and then they have 4 letters, and keeping them apart from one another is a very difficult thing to do sometimes. Mark, can you give us a thumbnail of what ACM Research does? That's the one on the bottom of the list.
Yeah, ACM Research is involved with as I can't even tell you exactly what they supply, but they supply to many, if not all, of the semiconductor chip makers. So that's the area of business that they're in. ARS, the second one from the bottom, is the company, and this is another speculation. We're hoping for a launchpad moment here. This is the company that makes the nasal spray version of EpiPens. So think about the EpiPens that you know about for people with anaphylactic shock. Just had an episode with our grandson here fairly recently. And this is much like Narcan. If you're familiar with Narcan, a nasal spray application is a pretty powerful innovation. It's cheaper and easier to take care of. And we think that is a very interesting speculation. There has been a little bit of insider selling that has caused a little bit of distraught. And that explains some of the downward price movement. So there you go. Ardelyx is that kidney company. Axos is the bank of the internet. And am I missing any other A's? I think that's good.
Not on this list, no. Yep.
Yep. Some of these do kind of run together as well. Somebody brought this up with me. They're having trouble with double verify versus D local, Ken. So it's not just the A's, the D's are at this too.
Okay.
Ken just selected double verify for the most recent roundtable. So if you want to, go back and take a look at here. And the audience actually seconded Ken's selection of double verify during that roundtable. Anything else, sir?
No, I think we're all set, ready to go. I have
I'm
a
gonna-
investment club meeting this evening, so I got to be on the road by about 4 o'clock. So got to give me some time to get ready here.
Okay, we'll wrap up. This is a slide. David F. Smith is a photographer that we know that's a member of the extended Better Investing community out there. And I just kind of love this one, getting those ducks in a row. They're not all going the same direction, but they're in a row. And he really does have some fantastic photography, and he's a good friend to the community. So love to feature David's work here from time to time. Anything else in the hopper?
Nothing except a big, happy, Merry Christmas to everybody. If you're not going to be with us for the next couple of times, but we still have a couple of roundtables before Christmas. So,
Well, we've got one
we,
round
we,
table
we, yeah, I'm
One.
sorry, not roundtable. I'm
after
sorry.
Christmas.
We have a roundtable after Christmas, but we have a
And
couple of bull sessions before Christmas. We're going to have to decide whether we want to do bull session on Christmas Eve or not, Mark. You know?
yeah, I've already decided we're going to close down next week. So we'll have one more bull session. We're not going to do a bull session on Christmas Eve
Thank you.
or New Year's Eve. I'm
Thank you.
going to
Thank
be
you.
traveling. Yeah, so we are taking the last off. We are going to do that eve of New Year's Eve roundtable because I think that's far enough away, and there still will be enough sobriety
That'll
for
be
our
December 30th, and our
December
special
30th.
guest at that roundtable will be Betsy Wills from the Rocky Mountain chapter. And Betsy is an excellent presenter, and she's going to give us a company that'll, I think, really make you think.
Data centers. Think data centers. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and shut down for the day. We'll see you in a week for our wrap-up session of the year. I will invite anybody out there if you can put your finger on a bull session that has really been enjoyable or informative or rewarding here over the last few years. Make a note of it. Send me an email or note it on the forum, and maybe we'll just do a little bit of reminiscing next week. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Have a great day, folks. See you next week. Bye-bye.